For the last 150 years or so, whenever we've talked about the absolute pinnacle of physics, there's really just one name sitting at the very top of the mountain.
Right. James Clerk Maxwell.
Exactly, Maxwell.
Hmm.
I mean, if you've ever taken a physics course, you know the absolute reverence attached to his name.
Oh, absolutely. When he published those equations for electromagnetism in the 19th century, it was, treated as nothing short of a miracle.
Yeah, it was this flawless predictive engine. You plug the numbers into his equations, and they just perfectly describe how electricity flows through a wire, or how magnets repel each other.
Or how the light waves are traveling through the room you are sitting in right now. It is genuinely the bedrock of our modern technological world.
It really is. Every radio, every smartphone, the whole electric grid, it all owes its existence to that math. But there's always been this quiet, uncomfortable secret hiding in plain sight.
The ontological gap, yeah.
Right. Maxwell's equations are brilliant at telling us exactly what is happening, but they completely fail to tell us why it's happening.
They describe the behavior of the fields with staggering accuracy, but they never actually tell us what a field is in a physical sense.
Yeah, it's like we've got the rule book for a game, but we don't know what the board looks like.
That's a great way to put it. It is a profound philosophical gap in our understanding. Maxwell gave us a phenomenological masterpiece, but an ontological blank slate.
So we've basically been predicting the shadow on the wall with breathtaking precision for a century and a half.
Yeah.
But we've never turned around to look at the object casting the shadow.
Precisely. The fields are treated as mathematical abstractions that just happen to exert force.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We're looking at a theoretical framework by George James Dukas, specifically his March 2026 paper titled Maxwell Revised.
And it is an incredibly ambitious piece of work.
Ambitious is an understatement. The premise here is so audacious, it legitimately gave me goosebumps when I was reading through the source material. Dukas is proposing something called TDUFT.
Trans-dimensional unified field theory.
Right, TDUFT.
Yeah.
And the central claim is that Maxwell's equations aren't wrong, but they're just a low-dimensional projection, like a flat shadow of a much larger hidden geometry.
A geometrically perfect universe where electricity, magnetism, gravity, and even zero-point energy are entirely unified.
And here is the real kicker for anyone who follows physics. He does it without a single arbitrary constant.
Which is practically unheard of.
Right. No fudge numbers, no fitted parameters that we just, had to measure in a lab and accept blindly.
That absence of fitted parameters is what makes this material so compelling. It's not just the mathematical elegance of unifying these massive concepts, though that alone is profound.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just elegant math.
It is the audacity to claim that the vacuum of space, the empty area between the stars or between the atoms in your body, is not a passive void. The vacuum itself is a living, geometrically precise lattice.
So space isn't empty.
Exactly. Space is the engine.
And if you're listening to this right now and wondering why you should care about some dense theoretical physics paper, let me frame it this way. If this framework holds up, this isn't just chalk on a blackboard.
No, not at all.
It's the blueprint for a completely new era of human engineering. We are talking about limitless vacuum energy. We're talking about gravitational control.
It would quite literally mark the end of burning fossil fuels to spin classical magnets.
Okay, let's unpack this, because
Okay.
to understand this new universe, we kind of have to throw away our college textbooks. We have to forget the standard model for a minute and start with the simplest math imaginable.
We really have to start at the absolute foundation. Dukas argues that the entire complexity of the universe derives from a single elemental quadratic equation.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. The equation is x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. From the roots of this beautifully simple algebraic expression, the TDUFT framework generates two dimensionless operators.
Okay, lay those operators out for us.
The first root is phi, the golden ratio, which is approximately 1.618. In this theory, phi is the expansive velocity operator.
Right, the expansive one. And the second?
The second root is psi I, which is approximately negative 0.618. Psi is the contractive time operator.
So we have expansion and contraction.
Correct. The proposition here is that everything in the physical universe, every particle, every wave, every force, is just a geometric expression of the interplay between these two operators.
Okay, I have to push back on that immediately, because it sounds, honestly, almost like magical thinking at first glance.
I understand the hesitation. It sounds too simple.
Right. I mean, the golden ratio. The mathematical quirk we see in the spiral of pine cones and Renaissance paintings,
Mm.
we're supposed to believe that an aesthetic rule of architecture is the root code of quantum mechanics.
It is a natural skepticism, but you have to separate the pop culture mystique of the golden ratio from its rigorous algebraic properties.
So it's not about aesthetics.
Not at all. It's about geometric self-consistency. There is a fundamental mathematical identity at play here. Phi to the -1 power plus phi to the -2 power equals exactly 1.
Wait, exactly one, not an approximation.
This isn't a close approximation, no. It is an exact, absolute algebraic truth. Dukas uses this specific property to prove how dimensional space can fold and unfold without breaking.
So it's like a structural guarantee.
Exactly. The universe uses the expansive phi operator to create separation, which physically manifests as space, waves, and fields.
And then the psi operator does the reverse.
Yes. Conversely, it uses the contractive psi operator to create joining or closure, which manifests as mass and localized particles.
So it's like finding out the source code for the entire universe is essentially binary.
In a sense, yes.
But instead of artificial zeros and ones sitting on a silicon chip, the universe is running on pure geometry. Expansion, which is phi, and contraction, which is psi I.
The universe breathing out and breathing in.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a cosmic breath.
The breathing metaphor captures the oscillatory nature of the operators, but we have to ground it in the physical implications, because those implications immediately upend the old paradigm.
Right, because this messes with stuff we thought was set in stone.
Consider the empirical constants physicists have relied on for generations. Take the permittivity of free space, known as epsilon naught,
Epsilon naught. Yeah, I remember that from high school physics.
or the permeability of free space, mu naught. These are foundational values. In classical physics, we had to measure them meticulously with instruments, write them down, and plug them into Maxwell's equations.
We just plugged them in so the math would align with reality. They were just, numbers you had to memorize for a physics exam.
Precisely. They were treated as fundamental givens.
We just accepted them as the random settings of our universe. We assumed the universe's baseline electrical storage capacity was just set to 8.85 times 10 to the -12, and nobody knew why. It just was.
But TDUFT argues that these constants are not arbitrary, nor do they require physical measurement. They are simply geometric ratios of the phi and psi operators.
This is the part that really got me. Break down those ratios.
Ducis demonstrates that epsilon naught is literally just phi squared. It is the geometric capacity for spatial separation.
Just phi squared. No lab equipment needed.
None. And mu naught, the magnetic resistance of the vacuum, is exactly phi cubed divided by psi squared.
That is staggering when you really think about it.
You don't need a laboratory to measure them. They are pure deterministic geometry emerging from that original quadratic equation.
It completely removes humanity's need to blindly measure reality to understand its rules. The rules dictate themselves.
That's the beauty of a purely geometric framework.
But okay, if the universe is running this fundamental code of phi and psi, it needs a processor to run on, right?
Substrate, yes.
Because abstract math floating in a void doesn't push a physical magnet across my desk. What is the actual physical substrate that these operators are acting upon?
The physical substrate is what the theory terms the eternal philatus.
The philatus.
Yes. The vacuum is not a continuum of nothingness. It is a discrete, highly structured geometric medium. Imagine an infinite network of nodes.
It's like a massive grid.
A grid. But these nodes do not sit at random distances from one another. They exist on high... What's fascinating here is that in TDUFT, dimensions are active, functioning geometric mechanisms. The dimension itself is the physical property.
That concept of active dimensions is exactly what we need to decode. Because if the lattice is just a bunch of nodes, how do physical properties emerge from that?
Now, the paper maps it out step by step through the dimensions.
Well, at dimension 2 or D2, you have the charge mode. Then you step up to dimension 3, D3, and you get voltage and spatial propagation.
And it continues to scale up.
You jump further to dimension 6, D6, and suddenly you have classical magnetism. And at dimension 10, D10, you get vacuum magnetism.
You do not have an independent electric charge sitting perfectly still inside a two-dimensional space. The D2 geometric structure literally is the charge.
I really had to wrestle with this when reading it, so I came up with an analogy. Think of it like origami.
Origami is an excellent visualization.
If you're listening, picture a completely flat piece of paper. That flat D2 plane represents electric charge. It has surface area, but no depth.
A pure two-dimensional manifold.
Exactly. Now, take that flat paper and fold it into a three-dimensional box, D3. Suddenly, you have an enclosed volume. You have a container that can hold pressure.
And in this universe, that D3 fold creates voltage and the capacity for spatial propagation.
Right. Now fold it several more times into an incredibly intricate aerodynamic shape, like a functioning paper airplane that can fly across the room and exert actual force.
The mechanical work phase?
Yeah, that complex origami structure is dimension 6, D6, which produces the mechanical work of classical magnetism. The fold itself is doing the work.
The origami concept is a very useful entry point, but we must be precise about how those folds maintain their structural integrity without collapsing.
Right, because an origami bird can just unfold.
Exactly, and the physical universe cannot simply dissolve. Dukas relies on a topological seal to explain this stability. He points to Euler's formula.
Oh, V minus E plus F equals 2.
Yes. The number of vertices minus the edges plus the faces of any convex polyhedron will always equal 2.
Okay, let's translate that into the vacuum lattice. What is a vertex or a face when we're talking about literally empty space?
In the phi lattice, a vertex is a physical node, an intersection point. An edge is the induction path connecting two nodes.
And the face?
A face is the geometric boundary created by those paths. Dukas demonstrates that every single functional shell on this lattice satisfies Euler's rule perfectly.
So they are mathematically locked in place.
Completely.
Yeah.
Take the D2 tier, which governs the photon wavefront. The theory states that this wavefront operates geometrically as a tetrahedron.
Okay, a four-sided pyramid shape.
It has 4 vertices, 6 edges, and 4 faces. 4 minus 6 plus 4 equals exactly 2. The geometry is topologically locked. It cannot collapse because it is mathematically sealed.
That is wild. So when a light bulb turns on, it isn't shooting a microscopic physical bullet like a little photon particle across the room.
No, there is no isolated object flying through an empty void.
The photon is actually a structural fold in the lattice. It's a tetrahedron-shaped tension, passing its geometry from node to node, rippling through the room.
That is the exact mechanism. It is a wave of geometric recursion rippling through the induction strings.
But wait, if an electric charge is just flat D2 geometry, and magnetism is a complex D6 geometric fold, what about the elephant in the room?
You mean gravity?
Yes, gravity. Where does gravity fit into this origami universe? Because everything we know from Einstein and general relativity tells us that gravity is the curving of space-time caused by massive objects. It's a fundamental force.
This is perhaps where TDUFT makes its most radical and aggressive departure from standard models. Section 3 of the source material outlines Dukas' third law.
Which entirely redefines gravity.
It does. The proposed equation is G equals 1 over psi to the 4th power. Gravity is strictly defined as the reciprocal of a fourfold time contraction.
Okay, I need you to break that psi power hierarchy down for me, because redefining gravity from a fundamental force into a byproduct of time is a massive, massive conceptual leap.
Let us trace the operator. Psi is the time operator, the mechanism of contraction.
Okay, psi is time.
When you square it, producing psi squared, you create a secondary geometric state, which is density. Density is essentially temporal self-contraction within the lattice.
So time compounding on itself creates density.
Yes. And when you take psi to the 4th power, psi to the 4th, you establish the total gravity reservoir. Therefore, big G is simply the inverse of that state, 1 over psi to the 4th.
The revolutionary implication here is that gravity is not an independent fundamental force of nature with its own unique particle.
It is simply the time operator acting at a fourfold structural depth.
A region of space that we perceive as having intense gravity is merely a region experiencing aggressive psi-squared temporal density.
That is exactly how the framework models it.
So, we have spent decades building massive underground particle accelerators, smashing protons together at near light speed, searching for the hypothetical graviton particle. And you're telling me it simply doesn't exist?
According to this mathematical framework, there is no graviton.
Gravity is just a symptom.
Searching for it is fundamentally misguided because gravity is not an independent field to be quantized.
It's like a traffic jam.
A traffic jam.
Yeah, if you're stuck on the highway, the traffic jam isn't a physical object you can touch. You can't put a traffic jam in a box, weigh it, or isolate a single traffic jam particle.
Ah, I see your point.
It doesn't exist independently. The jam is simply an emergent byproduct, a symptom of individual cars slowing down and compressing together in space and time. What Dukas is saying is that gravity is just the universe's traffic jam of time contraction.
That's a highly effective analogy, though. While a traffic jam implies random chaos, the temporal contraction in the lattice is flawlessly precise.
Right, the math is exact.
In fact, that specific traffic jam calculates Newton's gravitational constant without needing any physical measurement.
Wait, it calculates big G entirely from scratch.
Yes. In the classical paradigm, big G is a fitted parameter. We measure how fast things fall and reverse engineer the number, but TDU-FT calculates the abstract value 1 over c psi to the fourth, which yields 6.854.
And how does that translate to the real world?
When you apply the proper dimensional units derived from the phi lattice, that number maps with stunning precision to the empirical value of Newton's G, which is 6.674 times 10 to the negative 11th.
Wow.
The gravitational constant falls naturally out of the geometry of time.
It doesn't require a lab at all. It's just an inherent consequence of how the lattice folds.
Precisely.
And looking at the source text, redefining gravity as volumetric density, as a function of time contraction, is exactly the key that unlocks the most explosive claim in this entire paper.
The hidden half of electromagnetism.
Yes. TDUFT asserts that for over 150 years, the brightest minds in physics have only been observing exactly half of the magnetic spectrum.
The framework identifies two entirely distinct magnetic fields.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
There is D6, which is termed electric magnetism, and there is D10, which is field magnetism.
Okay, break down the physical difference between D6 and D10. Because we deal with magnetism constantly. It's in the alternator of my car. It's in the hard drive of my computer. It's literally sticking my grocery list to the refrigerator.
Sure.
Which one of these magnetic fields am I actually interacting with in everyday life?
Every single application you just listed operates strictly within D6. That is classical magnetism.
So everything we know is D6.
Yes. It is generated by the combination of mechanical force and charge area, specifically electrons moving in helical orbits through a physical conductor, like copper.
Okay.
The defining characteristic of D6 magnetism is that its induction loops close locally.
Meaning they don't reach far.
The entire magnetic circuit is contained within the immediate physical apparatus, the motor casing, the wire coil, the local space.
So D6 is a closed, localized loop. It's confined.
Right.
What exactly is D10 then?
D10 is vacuum magnetism. It does not require the physical motion of electrons through a wire. It emerges from rotational vacuum induction.
So it's born directly out of the lattice.
Exactly. The mathematical structure relies on density psi squared interacting with gravity volume, which operates at D3.
Okay, density and volume.
So D10 is, in a very real sense, a gravitational volume magnetic field. And crucially, unlike the tightly confined loops of D6, D10 does not close locally.
It closes globally.
Yes, its induction lines route straight through the infinite depths of the phi lattice itself.
But if this D10 field is everywhere, if it basically constitutes the very fabric of the vacuum, how did thousands of brilliant physicists completely overlook it for a century?
It's a fair question.
It's like we've spent a century and a half meticulously studying the ripples and splashes in a swimming pool. We've perfectly mapped how the water, which is D6, hits the tiles and bounces back.
A very closed system.
Right, but we never realized that there is a grate at the bottom of the pool, and it's directly connected to a massive, infinitely deep underground ocean. That vast ocean is D10. How do you miss the ocean?
We missed it because both fields perfectly obey one of the strictest rules in classical physics, the absence of magnetic monopolars.
Right. You can't have a North Pole without a South Pole.
Exactly. The classical equation states that the divergence of a magnetic field must be zero. Del dot B equals 0.
Okay.
This means that magnetic field lines must always, without exception, form closed loops. We observed that our local D6 magnetic fields formed these neat closed loops in our labs, and we satisfied the equation.
We ticked the box and moved on.
We mistakenly assumed that local closure was the only way to satisfy the math. We didn't realize that the D10 field also forms closed loops, ensuring the divergence is 0, but it achieves closure at a vastly different dimensional depth.
Routing entirely through the unseen geometry of the vacuum.
Exactly.
We thought we solved the puzzle, but we basically only finished the border pieces. And according to the text, our ignorance of D10 is exactly why every electric motor, every generator we have ever built, is trapped by strict thermodynamic limits.
So the Carnot efficiency limits? Yeah.
That's
Classical engineering is entirely trapped within the D6 regime. Because the electron loops in our standard motors close locally, they are completely isolated from the broader lattice.
They can't reach the ocean.
They cannot reach down and leak into the D10 reservoir. Therefore, the mechanical torque you extract is strictly and punishingly limited by the electrical energy you input.
Minus the inevitable loss to entropy and heat, of course.
Exactly. To use your analogy, you are just aggressively sloshing the same small amount of water around the swimming pool. You aren't pulling a single drop from the underground ocean.
If there really are two distinct types of magnetism, how did James Clerk Maxwell write his legendary unified equations and just casually miss one of them? I mean, was his math actually wrong?
No, his math was incredibly precise for the specific phenomena he was aware of. Maxwell didn't make a mathematical error, he made an assumption.
An assumption.
He solved his equations for the specific limiting condition where the D10 field is effectively set to 0. He was operating purely in the local limit.
Because that's all he could see.
Exactly. To understand the complete mechanism, we have to examine the full unified field equation presented in TD-UFT.
Okay, let's look at what the paper calls Maxwell completed. How does Dukas rewrite the holy grail of physics?
Conceptually, the unified equation is an expression of symmetry. It states that the phi gradient of the combined fields, specifically phi times E plus I times d6 plus I squared times d10, is perfectly equal to the double-time contraction operator psi squared acting on the partial derivative of that exact same quantity.
Okay, let me pause you right there. Because if you are listening to this on your commute right now, trying to mentally visualize a 10-dimensional calculus equation is probably an absolute nightmare.
It is dense, I admit.
Let's translate that raw math into the operator form that Dukas uses, because it tells a much clearer physical story. The text maps the cycle out as v squared times t cubed times v cubed t cubed times t to the fourth.
That mapping is crucial for understanding the mechanics. Let us deconstruct it.
Please do.
The v squared term represents electric storage, the capacity to hold energy. The t cubed term represents orbit closure, which is the localization of that energy.
Okay, localized energy.
The combined term v cubed t cubed represents the torque layer, which translates directly to classical d6 magnetism performing work.
And the final term?
Finally, the t to the fourth term represents the massive vacuum reservoir of D10.
Right.
What this equation fundamentally declares is that these four-dimensional states form a perfectly conserved, self-consistent thermodynamic cycle across the golden ratio lattice.
And what absolutely blew my mind reading this section was the role of the letter I.
The imaginary unit.
Yeah. In standard math, I is an imaginary number, the square root of -1. It's an abstract tool used to solve complex algebra. But in TD-UFT isn't just an abstract math ghost. It is a physical 90-degree dimensional rotation operator.
That is a vital translation from pure math to physical geometry. The electric field, E, structurally rotates 90 degrees to become local magnetism, D6.
Which accounts for one I.
That accounts for one application of the operator I. But the equation continues. It rotates another 90 degrees. As we know, I squared equals -1.
Right.
This mathematical -1 physically encodes a 180-degree geometric opposition.
Wait, so they are perfectly opposed?
Yes. The local D6 magnetism and the vacuum D10 magnetism exist in exact 180-degree reciprocal opposition to each other within the lattice.
It operates exactly like a cosmic breathing exercise. Think about the 4 steps of that cycle we just outlined.
Walk me through your thought process.
First, you inhale energy into the geometric nodes. That's the electric storage phase, the v squared. Then you hold your breath, localizing that charge to form a stable structure or orbit that's d cubed.
The closure phase, yes.
Then you exhale, releasing that stored energy as mechanical work or magnetic torque. That's v cubed, t cubed. And finally, the vacuum automatically rushes back in to refill your empty lungs. That is the massive T to the fourth reservoir.
Inhale, hold, exhale, refill.
Exactly. It's a perpetual geometric engine.
And if you take that complete higher dimensional breathing cycle and project it down into our observable lower dimensions, you perfectly recreate the 4 classical laws of Maxwell.
They just pop right out of it.
Gauss's law for electricity is simply the D2 projection of this larger cycle. Ampere's law is merely the D6 projection.
So Maxwell wasn't wrong. He was just looking at the shadows.
TD-UFT provides mathematical proof that classical electromagnetism is nothing more than the low-energy, localized shadow of a much deeper, vastly more powerful dimensional reality.
Which brings us to the most important question of this entire deep dive. If this Luth of the fourth vacuum refill mechanism legitimately exists in the mathematics, if there genuinely is a limitless underground ocean of vacuum magnetism, How do we sink a pipe into it?
The engineering application.
Exactly. Can we build a physical machine to access it?
We can. The framework does not leave this as a mere philosophical exercise. It provides the exact engineering parameters required to breach that dimensional barrier.
And that's what he calls the motor law equation.
Yes. The motor law is articulated as power output at the d phi plane is equal to eta zp, multiplied by the classical Lorentz force, multiplied by mechanical velocity.
Eta zp. ETA. Eta zp. The source text treats that as the absolute magic variable. What is it?
Eta zp stands for the vacuum coupling efficiency.
Okay, vacuum coupling efficiency.
It is the specific scalar parameter that defines exactly how much of the D10 vacuum reservoir your physical motor is successfully accessing.
So it's a measure of our connection to the ocean.
If your eta zp is 0, you possess a standard classical Maxwellian motor. Your output is strictly dictated by your input.
You're just sloshing the pool water.
But if you can elevate eta zp to a value greater than 0, you are actively pulling auxiliary magnetic flux directly out of the lattice structure itself.
But how do you practically engineer a system where eta zp is greater than 0?
The mechanism relies on a highly specific condition called local entropy reversal.
Local entropy.
The text defines the pathway mathematically. The entropy from D4 to D7 must be less than 0. You are required to drive the local entropy of the system negative across that specific dimensional bridge.
Now hold on. Local entropy reversal. I have to play the skeptic here because reversing entropy is usually a giant red flag in physics.
It certainly sets off alarm bells for classical physicists.
Isn't that just highly technical jargon for free energy? The laws in thermodynamics are absolute. You cannot create energy out of nothing. It sounds like the paper is trying to sneak a perpetual motion machine past us.
Your skepticism is warranted. The conservation of energy is paramount. But TDUFT does not violate the first or second laws of thermodynamics.
How does it avoid violating them?
Because it does not claim that energy is being created from nothing. The energy already exists.
In the lattice.
Exactly. Global entropy across the entirety of the universe still steadily increases through psi damping, the gradual friction of the time operator across the infinite lattice.
So the universe as a whole is still running down.
Yes. You are merely inducing a highly localized, temporary reversal. You are bleeding geometric tension out of the pre-existing D10 lattice and converting that structural tension into mechanical work within the D6 plane.
Ah, okay. So the energy is already there. It's stored in the taut geometry of space itself, like a highly wound spring. We aren't creating the spring, we're just finally figuring out how to unlatch it and tap the line.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the precise, mathematically rigorous mechanism behind the concept of zero-point energy.
It totally strips away the mysticism.
It isn't magic. It is thermodynamic tension transfer executing across dimensional boundaries.
And what makes this paper so fascinating is that it drops the theoretical posturing. It makes highly specific, easily falsifiable engineering predictions.
It provides the blueprints.
It tells you exactly how the hardware needs to be built. It points out that the standard haphazardly wound copper coils we use in everything, from your kitchen blender to an electric Tesla, have a negligible eta ZP of maybe 0.01 to 0.03.
They are functionally blind to the vacuum.
But the text predicts that if you build phi-tuned coils where the physical winding radius strictly adheres to phi cubed or phi to the fifth, the vacuum coupling efficiency violently spikes to between 0.05 and 0.20.
The physical geometry of the copper coil must perfectly mirror the golden ratio resonance of the vacuum lattice it sits within.
Form mimicking function on a cosmic scale.
When you achieve that geometric harmony, the text predicts a highly measurable 5 to 20% excess torque above all known classical limits. This is an entirely testable engineering claim.
That's a huge jump in efficiency.
Furthermore, the text references gravimetric signatures during these resonant states. It cites experiments with niobium rings demonstrating 10 to the negative 8th gram weight transients.
Wait, weight transients, the physical weight changes.
This indicates that the physical weight of the object is fluctuating because the D10 gravitational volume surrounding it is being actively distorted by the resonance.
We are literally talking about the foundational blueprints for engineering anti-gravity and zero-point energy generators, simply by aligning our hardware with the golden ratio of the vacuum.
It shifts the paradigm from science fiction directly into an engineering problem.
That's just wild. But it also makes me wonder, if D6 magnetism and D10 vacuum magnetism are just two accessible rungs on this dimensional ladder, how high does the ladder go? What exists above dimension 10?
The framework introduces what it calls the infinite B-field ladder.
The infinite B-field ladder.
The progression does not arbitrarily stop at 10. The rule is that every even dimension, defined algebraically as d sub 4 plus 2n, spawns an entirely new, higher-order magnetic reality.
Okay, so D10 is just the start.
Exactly. Therefore, beyond the D10 vacuum field, you reach D14, which governs gravitational compression.
D14 is gravitational compression.
Beyond that is D18, which represents a realm of physics currently entirely undiscovered by humanity.
Uncharted territory.
This recursion extends infinitely upward to D-infinity, which represents the ultimate absolute source reservoir of the entire vacuum.
An infinite ladder of nested realities, each more fundamental than the last. But if everything is connected by this infinite lattice, what governs how fast a wave or an effect can travel through it?
You're referring to the propagation limit.
Yeah. In our universe, the ultimate speed limit is the speed of light, c. How does TDUFT explain why light travels at exactly the speed it does?
The derivation of the speed of light, which the text refers to as the C clause, is one of the most structurally elegant proofs in the entire document.
I couldn't agree more.
In classical physics, C is merely another empirical constant. We shine a laser, measure it, and record it as roughly 300 million meters per second.
We just know what it is, but we don't know why it's that exact speed.
But Dukas mathematically proves that C is a strict, inescapable geometric necessity of the lattice structure. The derivation begins with the fundamental dimensional baseline we established earlier.
The golden ratio identity.
Yes, 2 plus phi to the negative 1 plus phi to the negative 2 equals exactly 3. That equation is exact.
Right, but 3 is an absolute integer. The speed of light is roughly 2.9979 times 10 to the 8th. It's a messy, highly specific number. How do you get from the perfect integer 3 down to that exact messy fraction?
The attenuation from the ideal state of 3 down to the precise measured velocity of 2.99792458 times 10 to the 8th meters per second is calculated utilizing the Ramanujan-Rogers continued fraction.
The Ramanujan-Rogers continued fraction. Okay, for listeners who might not be deep into math history, Srinivasa Ramanujan was a self-taught, brilliant mathematician from India in the early 20th century.
A true genius of number theory.
He was famous for intuitively writing down these incredibly complex, mind-bending infinite fractions without showing traditional proofs. But what exactly is a continued fraction in this context, and how does it apply to light?
Conceptually, a continued fraction is a number expressed as a nested series of fractions. A fraction within a fraction extending infinitely downward.
So it's turtles all the way down, mathematically speaking.
In a way, it represents an infinite cascade of resistance. Ramanujan discovered this specific continued fraction over a century ago as an exercise in pure abstract number theory.
Just playing with math.
It had absolutely no known physical application at the time, yet TDUFT reveals that this precise, infinitely nesting fraction perfectly models the physical reality of recursive attenuation.
Attenuation of the light wave.
Yes, it mathematically represents the drag experienced by the flat D2 photon wavefront as it attempts to propagate through the multidimensional structure of D3 spatial geometry.
So the math was just waiting for the physics to catch up.
Yeah.
The speed of light isn't a random universal speed limit enforced by a cosmic traffic cop.
No, it is a structural necessity.
It's simply the ultimate terminal velocity of geometry dragging against itself. The math perfectly yields the exact value of p without requiring a single human measurement.
Exactly, and it extends beyond just the speed of light. This raises an important point about how the framework handles mass as well.
Oh, right, the Higgs boson.
The framework utilizes this identical dimensional recursion to derive mass. Take the Higgs mass, for example. Standard models require highly complex calibrations to accommodate it.
Just to make the math work out.
But TDUFT calculates the Higgs mass strictly as a dimensional resonance. The formula is mass equals c multiplied by g multiplied by t, all divided by d squared.
And what did that spit out?
The resulting calculation yields approximately 125 GeV, which identically matches the empirical measurements collected by the Large Hadron Collider at CERN.
It's just perfectly aligned.
The mass is not an arbitrary property of an isolated particle. It is a harmonic resonance of the lattice.
Okay, so we've covered how waves of light move, how the vacuum creates gravity, and how infinite layers of magnetism stack on top of each other.
We've covered the fields, yes.
But what about matter? What about the actual tangible stuff of the universe? The table I'm sitting at, the microphone I'm speaking into, my own hands.
The physical substrate of our everyday experience.
Yeah. How does solid, heavy matter fit into a universe that you were describing as nothing but shifting waves, operators, and golden ratio math?
That brings us to section 8 of the source material, which serves as the ultimate capstone of the theory, the ladder unification theorem.
A ladder unification theory.
This theorem establishes what Dukas calls the AWO-1 duality. It posits that the entire lattice, regardless of dimension, operates in only two fundamental modes.
Mode 0 and Mode 1. Let's really drill down into the physical difference between them, because this is where the whole universe just kind of clicks together.
Let us examine mode 0 first.
Okay.
Mode 0 occurs when the operators sum to 0. Phi plus psi equals 0. This mathematically represents a state of absolute separation.
Separation, so no connection.
There is no closure and therefore no bound state can form. This open geometry physically manifests as propagating waves and unconfined fields.
So everything we've talked about with light and fields.
Everything we have discussed regarding the induction ladder. Light waves radiating from a star, electric fields expanding across a room, magnetic induction. All of these are simply the lattice operating in mode 0.
And so, logically, Mode 1 must be the exact opposite.
Indeed. Mode 1 occurs when the inverse harmonics of the expansive operator sum to exactly unity. Phi to the -1 plus phi to the -2 equals 1.
The golden ratio identity again?
This represents the mathematical state of joining. Instead of open, propagating paths, the geometry folds back upon itself to create closed-loop, stabilized resonances on the lattice.
No, it knots itself up.
A stable, closed-loop geometric resonance is exactly what we observe and interact with as mass or solid particles. This constitutes the Dirac and nuclear ladders.
So what does this all mean for our fundamental understanding of reality?
It means that the long-sought dream of physics is realized here. There is no separate set of rules for quantum particles and macroscopic fields.
They aren't different things.
They are not two fundamentally different kinds of stuff occupying the universe. They are merely arithmetic states of the exact same eternal lattice.
Let's give a concrete example of that.
For instance, an electron, which possesses a small mass of 0.511 MeV, is structurally nothing more than a phi-psi operator crossing at the relatively shallow R2 radial shell.
A shallow knot in the lattice.
Yes. A proton, which is significantly heavier at 938 MeV, is not made of different material. It is simply a deeper, more complex geometric closure occurring down at the R5 shell.
That is just incredibly elegant. The universe is just geometry folding and closing at different depths.
Yeah.
Solid matter is just a knot in the vacuum.
A beautifully descriptive way to summarize it.
The source material uses a phenomenal master example to prove this interplay, and I want to spend some time on it because it really makes the math tangible. It looks closely at the carbon atom.
The carbon atom is perhaps the most perfect demonstration of TDUFT because it is the phi lattice rendered visible in our macroscopic world.
It bridges the gap.
It flawlessly demonstrates both mode 0 and mode 1 operating simultaneously across multiple dimensional scales.
Right. So if we zoom in on a single carbon atom, you look at the dense nucleus at the center, which contains 6 protons and 6 neutrons.
The heavy core.
According to this framework, these heavy particles are mode 1 deep geometric closures occurring on the d11 and d13 shells.
Correct.
Then you zoom out slightly to look at the 6 electrons orbiting that nucleus. These electrons are also mode 1 closed loops, but they are shallower knots occurring up on the d3 shell.
So the particles themselves, heavy and light, are all mode 1 closures. They are the stable, localized nodes.
But atoms don't just float around alone all the time.
Exactly. An atom rarely exists in total isolation. You must consider the chemical bonds that lock multiple carbon atoms together to form macroscopic structures, like the intensely rigid lattice of a diamond.
Oh, this is the best part.
These covalent bonds are fundamentally different from the particles. The bonds are mode 0 operations.
Because they're sharing, not closing.
They are D2 induction currents, actively sharing electron density across the spatial gaps between the nodes.
So the particles are the closed mode 1 nodes, and the chemical bonds holding them together are the open mode 0 connection strings.
You have the complete architecture mapped out.
But the ultimate smoking gun proof is found when you analyze the diamond itself. Because if a solid diamond is truly just a microscopic quantum lattice scaled all the way up into something I can hold in my hand, we should be able to physically measure the golden ratio dictating its structure.
And according to the paper, we can do exactly that.
Walk us through the proof.
The evidence is highly compelling. The text directs our attention to the Raman spectrum of diamond.
The Raman spectrum.
Raman spectroscopy measures the phonon frequencies, essentially the natural vibrational modes of the crystal lattice when it is stimulated by light.
How the crystal vibrates.
When you analyze a diamond, the spectrum reveals two prominent, highly specific frequency peaks. You find the optical phonon resonating at exactly 1332 inverse centimeters, and the graphite G band resonating at 1580 inverse centimeters.
And here's the punchline for the entire deep dive. If you take 1580 and divide it by 1332, you get 1.186, which is an almost mathematically perfect match for the golden ratio inverse, phi to the -1.
It is a profound correlation.
The spacing between the literal vibrations of a solid diamond is dictated by the exact same golden ratio geometric operator that dictates the speed of light, and the exact same operator that calculates the gravitational constant.
It is the invisible lattice made completely visible and vibrating right in the palm of your hand.
It just blows my mind.
It represents the ultimate structural unification. The tangible atomic lattice of the diamond is perfectly fractally embedded within the unseen vacuum lattice of the universe.
Everything is just scaling up.
The carbon atom definitively proves that classical electromagnetism, the strange probabilistic world of quantum mechanics, and the heavy curving universe of general relativity are not separate disciplines.
They're all the same thing.
They are merely incomplete, low-dimensional projections of the exact same geometric reality.
It completely rewires how you perceive the physical world around you. You look down at a diamond ring, or a piece of graphite in a pencil, or even the carbon making up the cells in your own hand, and you realize you aren't just looking at a random, chaotic collection of particles floating aimlessly in an empty void.
You are looking at a perfectly tuned, infinitely recursive geometric symphony.
And it is a symphony composed entirely of just two fundamental notes, the expansion of phi and the contraction of psi. Every force, every particle, every moment of time is simply a chord struck from those two operators.
A very poetic yet mathematically accurate summary.
We have covered a massive amount of incredibly dense ground today. To synthesize all of this, for anyone still trying to wrap their head around it, what George James Dukas has achieved with TDUFT is essentially pulling back the curtain on a 150-year-old mystery.
He has provided the ontology that Maxwell lacked.
Maxwell gave us the what? The perfect behavioral rules of the electromagnetic shadow dancing on the wall. But Dukas has finally given us the why. The brilliant geometric object that is actually casting the shadow.
If you take anything away from this deep dive, it's this. You aren't standing in empty space right now. You are fully immersed in a living, mathematically perfect, eternal phi lattice.
The paradigm shift cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
If the mathematical and physical framework of TDUFT is rigorously validated, and we must remember that the text offers highly specific, readily falsifiable experiments like the phi-tuned coils to do so, it signals the absolute end of our current technological era.
The brutal, inefficient era of digging up fossil fuels, setting them on fire just to boil water, all to spin classical D6 magnets inside power plants, is entirely obsolete under this physics.
We are standing on the precipice of phi-tuned engineering. We now possess the theoretical mathematical gateway to directly access zero-point energy, to purposely engineer local entropy reversal, and to manipulate the very volume of gravity itself.
We are transitioning from a species that merely observes the downstream effects of the universe to a species capable of actively interfacing with the root geometry of reality.
And that transition leads me to one final, deeply provocative thought that I haven't been able to shake since I first opened this source material.
I'm curious to hear it.
The text establishes that the universe is essentially the phi lattice, endlessly exploring itself through dimensional recursion. It scales infinitely upward, building complex realities like D23 black holes, all drawing from that infinite D-infinity vacuum reservoir.
Yes, the infinite B-field ladder.
If every even dimension creates an entirely new physical reality, and if solid matter itself is really just a temporary closed loop of geometry, what happens to human consciousness when we finally learn to engineer those higher dimensions?
That is a staggering extrapolation of the premise.
Right, because if our physical brains are constructed out of these exact same phi lattice carbon atoms, are our own minds, our own thoughts, simply localized entropy reversals.
We are part of the lattice too, after all.
Exactly. Are we as conscious beings just incredibly complex temporary geometric holding patterns? And if we are we just waiting for our technology to catch up so we can directly tune our consciousness into that infinite D-infinity reservoir?
When we finally build the machine that taps into the underground ocean of vacuum energy,
Do we suddenly realize that we are the ocean?
it forces a total reevaluation of our place in the dimensional hierarchy. Once you truly conceptualize the Phalatus, you cannot look at reality the same way again.
You really can't. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. It's heavy, it's complex, but it is undeniably beautiful. Remember, the next time you look up at the vastness of the night sky, you aren't looking at miles of empty nothingness. You are looking at the active, breathing geometry of eternity. We'll catch you next time.